Greetings, MacNNers. I'm done gallivanting for a week. And so it's time once again for your favorite podcast and mine, the MacNN Podcast, episode 42. Welcome back, MacNNers. Always nice to have you with us. My name is Charles Martin. I'm the editor of MacNN, and joining me this week, as usual, is managing editor Mike. Yeah!
Now, I'm assuming I should be jovial here and say something like greetings and salutations, but we'll just go with sup.
No, I need your low, soul-sucking lack of energy to offset my electric light bulb.
Oh, good. That shouldn't be a problem.
We have a good variety of topics to talk about this week, although actually most of them are articles that we generated ourselves rather than, news. It was a little bit of a slow news week is what I'm trying to say. The run-up to Thanksgiving is always kind of like this, and after all the companies have finally finished announcing all the cool products they're going to inflict on us, try to sell us, give us during the Christmas season. Well,
it doesn't stop analysts from making crap up.
No. They'll have plenty to say about how awful Apple will do this quarter, I'm sure.
Oh, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the new rumors of the small format iPhone that will be creeping out sometime next year.
Yes, there's that. And, we should call this segment Rumors We'd Like to Like. But...
Well, let's be clear. Hang on. I do think that Apple is considering the possibility of an iPhone 5S styled device size-wise. I think they're thinking about it.
Yeah, certainly they're thinking about it. I think they're thinking of upgrading slightly the existing iPhone 5S, just make it a little more attractive, goose sales in the lower end market.
Yeah, let's be perfectly clear about this. Just because Apple's thinking about it doesn't mean it's going to see the light of day. There was an entire book from Apple Design back in the late 90s about products that Apple had them working on, and a bunch of them just never materialized.
Yes, that's true.
So, yeah, I have no doubt that Apple's looking at this, but whether or not they're actually going to do it, I don't know. I think maybe the market segment that they're considering are looking at a smaller iPhone. They're served by the iPod Touch.
Yeah.
Because that's what we're talking about here, right? We're talking about an iPod Touch with a cellular radio.
Yeah, which can be on or off. You can use it as an iPod Touch if you wish.
Mm-hmm.
I certainly have a number of users in our local Mac user group, and I'll come to that in a minute. I have a number of users in that group who use iPod Touches. They don't want to be tied down by a cellular contract because they don't use the phone part that much, or they already have a phone at home. Yes, I admit it. These are the people who still have landlines. Probably the only ones left, but humor them.
Well, Wi-Fi is ubiquitous. You can really go just about anywhere and find a Wi-Fi connection that you can use. My supermarket has Wi-Fi.
What?
Yeah, a giant supermarket near me has free Wi-Fi for its customers to use while in the store.
You can actually take a picture of that bell pepper you're considering buying and get an expert opinion.
So with Apple's coherence, right, you can always get your FaceTime audio on your iPod Touch in the supermarket if you're connected to their Wi-Fi.
Wow.
So it can be argued that the need for an iPhone is less than it has ever been.
Well, yes, you can say that, at least if you live in big cities or, strong urban areas. In parts of the city here, we have, ubiquitous Wi-Fi everywhere provided by the city.
Well, and that's even more of an argument for no iPhone.
Yeah, you can get by. When I travel to the United States, as I do a lot, as those of you who follow the podcast know, I mostly buy data plans with very few minutes, if any, of, quote, talk time, unquote. And I use Skype, or I use Freedom Pop, or I use Vonage, one of those types of apps, to make my calls using data, right? FaceTime audio, which we're using right now, works great.
You live in Canuckistan.
I do.
I live in a suburb just south of Washington, D.C., and while I actually have less pervasive Wi-Fi than you do, but everywhere I go and everywhere I stop where I'd actually want to talk to someone on the phone, there's Wi-Fi for me.
Well, and this is the thing, and this is one of the reasons why a lot of the phone carriers are now moving to support Wi-Fi calling. It's less skin off their nose, so to speak. So they can reduce their overhead by shifting some of it onto Wi-Fi, and consumers see savings. Mm-hmm. It's a win-win, I think.
Yeah, I could see that. Now, as far as the tech specs of the device goes, there's no way it's an A9.
Yeah.
There's no way.
Apple just wouldn't do such a thing.
Yeah, there's no way that a 6C, for lack of a better term, is going to have an A9.
Or a 5S.
Or whatever the marketing geniuses are going to call it.
Don't interrupt my heavy metal.
Are you throwing up the horns? I hope you're throwing up the horns.
Oh, wait till you hear that in post. It'll be amazing.
I'm sure that's going to be great. So are they working on it? Yeah. Are we going to see it? I'm not so certain about that. I mean, I've been famously wrong before, right? I mean, the whole iPad mini debacle, I just didn't see where it should exist given the price points of the iPod Touch. And Apple said, well, here you go, iPad mini. Okay.
Repeat that for the iPad Pro. We were like, too big. Nobody will want one. We were, of course. Well, it remains to be seen if we were wrong or not, actually. But everybody wants that pencil. Oh, yeah. I don't blame them either.
Yeah, as far as the iPad Pro goes, developers are kind of cautiously looking at it to see. There are some compelling business reasons to not do an iPad Pro app at a premium price.
Yeah.
We'll see how it all plays out. Well, it was the same thing with iPhone and iPod Touch to iPad. Let's see how it all plays out, a lot of places said. And, well, we know how that played out.
Yeah. The interesting thing to me is that this thing has been out in stores for a few days now. It's out in the world. People are reviewing it and getting their hands on them. And one of the big things that people are talking about is how much better the sound is. It's supposed to be amazing.
It's just sheer physics. I do have mine.
There you go.
Mine arrived about a half an hour ago, and it's just physics of the larger sound chambers that they're using. It is a very loud device. But that's fine, given the intention of the device, that there's absolutely nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, right. And so, as you say, the sound is way better and louder than it ever was before, and yet no fart apps. None. Not a single one. Missing an opportunity there, developers. Fart Pro.
I'm just waiting for the first iPad Pro to be held up at a concert and somebody gets beaten to death with it.
Well, the iPad Pro is a pretty formidable weapon in its own right, so you never know. Mm-hmm. So that's one of the rumors, and our sort of official semi-guess on this is, yeah, something like that might happen, but we don't think that it's an all-new 4-inch device. There's just not a big enough market for that, quite frankly. I mean, even if you take all the iPod Touch owners and assume they're going to move to this new 4-inch thing, and all the petite people who just happen to like the 4-inch screen better for reasons. Even if you added all of those people up, it's not a fraction of the people who are going to buy an iPhone 6 or 6S, one of the larger screen devices. So there's not much reason to do it except as a revamp of the iPod Touch or a revamp of the iPhone 5S. I would love to see them sort of goose the iPad 5S a little bit to make it attractive to developing markets and to people who just happen to like that form factor, but cheaper than the iPhone 5S was.
Here's the thing with rumors like this and the iPad Pro, and even for that matter, the 6 and the 6 Plus series phones for that matter. If you make something up and you say it long enough, there will be something that approaches what you were talking about, and you can say, see, I was right.
Yes. There's at least one analyst who makes a living doing this.
Yeah, we've already spoken about that before.
Yes.
I guess I'm having a hard time shifting away from my hosting duties, but this is a nice segue into Tim Cook's remarks earlier this week. So play the music.
Here it comes. And there it is.
So anyway, like I alluded to a little before, Tim Cook earlier this week shot down an iOS OS X convergence device. It wasn't a big essay about it. He just said that it'd be too compromised a device for them to really consider it right now.
Yes.
I can see that. What is your initial thoughts on this? And we'll go into it a little bit deeper, because the three of us, Charles, William, and I, all kind of pounded our heads together and wrote a piece on this a little bit earlier today.
That's right. It's a complicated subject because there are certainly elements and times when I'm using an iOS device and wish that I didn't have to touch the screen to do something, that I wish I had a different way of controlling it, like, say, a trackpad. And so, all the things that Steve ever said about the iPad, that it was the right size, that it'll never have a stylus, all that stuff. We've talked about this before, but in the right circumstances, and he meant this too, But if the right argument can be made for it, Steve was notorious for changing his mind, and that's as it should be. You don't want a previously held opinion. Politicians, pay attention to this little pearl. You don't want a previously held opinion to become so rigid that new facts or new circumstances that change the equation don't sway you anymore. You always need to keep an open mind about anything you said you would never do or never have. Someday there may be an argument for it. The advances in battery technology and the advances in screen technology, and yes, the advances in stylus technology have moved the needle to a point where some of these things are really not just a better idea than they used to be, but almost compulsory for certain types of applications. I think we're going to see with the iPad Pro, we're going to see a whole class of apps like Procreate, which has jumped on the bandwagon early, that really exist mainly to take advantage of the hardware, that pencil hardware. But before we get back to the pencil, the whole thing about convergence is that I like having the Mac as the Mac and iOS as iOS, generally speaking. There's always times that I wish I was doing one or the other. And the kind of let's borrow the best ideas from one and put it in the other one, and the vice versa, and tit for tat that goes back and forth between the Mac and iOS development teams, for me, has been a boon for users. Things like handoff and continuity in particular make my life actually easier. The fact that I can get messages on my watch and my Mac. The fact that I can make phone calls on my Mac now. These things are huge productivity boosters to me, and so I think they're great. But I don't see this as necessarily meaning there will only be one operating system someday in the future. Technically, we're already on one operating system. iOS is born of OS X. So it is, in fact, we have already achieved what Microsoft was hoping for in the first place, one Windows to rule them all. We have it, but it's just a subset of the master OS, which is still Mac OS to this day.
Well, let me make a interesting point toward the whole convergence device. We actually have two examples of convergence devices that actually work reasonably well. Actuatron has had their mod book since about 2008, where they'll take existing hardware and modify it. So now, bam, you now have a tablet OS X machine.
I love the idea of a chop shop for Macs.
I do too.
And these guys have always been that, and I love them for it.
I do too. And point the second is Xcode runs iOS 9 applications that you're coding to begin with. If Cupertino really, really wanted to, they would make the ability for you to run Ticket to Ride for OS X on your Mac. But there's no compelling argument for them to do so right now. Mm-hmm. We said it fairly well, I think. I think our statement saying that we have no problem with features being swapped back and forth, but we really don't want OS X to become more like iOS than it already has. I would like OS X to remain discreet, and I think it will because, frankly, are you going to do your development on an iOS device?
Right. Well, not only that, but I mean, getting back to Steve Jobs for a minute, he said something that has really stuck with me all these years. I've mentioned it before, which is that the realization was that some people need a truck and some people still need a truck.
Well, that falls down.
But a lot of people can get by on a scooter, quite frankly. Most users could get by on a skateboard compared to the power of a truck. And so I think there will always be a need among power users to have a more powerful operating system. And that's where the Mac is headed, I think. And William, in one of his other pieces, just talked about, one day we'll all be carrying maybe one or at most two small devices with us to handle almost all of our computing needs. That day is almost here.
Yeah, I think he was misconstrued a little bit with some of the comments that we've been
getting. He was,
getting.
But I understood what he was trying to talk about. I think of my Apple Watch as a sneak preview of a future iPhone, right? That the iPhone wouldn't be in my pocket anymore. The watch is the phone. And to be fair, since I got this thing, my phone comes out very rarely. So it really is sort of a sneak preview of future phone technology, I guess. And I think that we are going to get to a point where most users, and I've been saying this ever since the iPad came out, most users can get by with a wearable and an iPad, and this would meet all typical user needs. But real computers, for want of a better term, are still going to have a place.
My iOS devices, other than a couple of entertainment educational titles, are complete and utter adjuncts to my OS X machines. Mm-hmm. When I want to get something done, I'm not whipping open my iPad to do it. I'm not cracking open my phone. I'm opening my MacBook Pro.
Well, I mean, it depends on how you define things that are done. For me, a lot of my job involves really two things: writing and answering messages. And I can do both of these on an iPad without too much difficulty. Yes, once I start getting into the graphics or working with certain kinds of CMS systems, so more pro-level apps like that, then I start feeling the need for the MacBook. But really, I find myself taking the MacBook out less and less.
Okay. I mean, that's just your workflow. Everyone has their own apps, which is the point of our app series that we're running right now. Everyone's got their own workflow.
Oh, yeah. No, the day you'll really impress me is when you can do an Excel spreadsheet on a watch. That would be impressive.
No. No, it would not.
Be like listening to somebody playing a game of Battleship. Okay, now fill in E4.
Your resolution on your watch is very, very similar to that of the original Macintosh.
I know, isn't that uncanny?
So, I mean, when we did Excel spreadsheets on our tiny little 9 point?
It's a 9-inch screen, so.
9-inch screen, thank you. It's doable, but man, would it suck.
And yet, wasn't there a fellow that got, I believe they did, they got a VMac emulator running on the watch?
Yep. They booted up one of the old OSs, one of the old Mac OSs.
Fascinating.
Well, more power to them, I suppose. Yeah. But anyway, I think poor Tim is a little tired. I don't think the device would be too compromised. I think him saying that it would be too compromised is ridiculous because they've got the hardware to do it. They can do it. If we don't think that they've got a full version of iOS running on Intel processors, we're nuts.
Yeah. So you're absolutely right about that. Well, here's what I think is going on. This is something that they learned from Steve, which is say that it would be impractical or a bad experience until you figure out a way to make it a good experience, and then suddenly you embrace it. This is exactly what they did with the whole stylus issue and many other things, the size of the iPhone screen, everything that they've justified that Steve ever once said will never do. What he meant was, he'll never do it. But what was really going on was we can't figure out how to make the experience really good.
Right.
We already have hybrid tablet laptop devices. They are all over the place in the Windows world, and they suck.
Well, no, they don't. The Surface is not a compromised experience. The Surface is.
I was just coming to the Surface Pro, which I honestly think is the first time they've gotten it right.
Yeah, the Surface RT was a bad mistake, and that seriously confused the marketplace. But the power of the Surface Pro cannot be denied. I mean, Microsoft is pulling some shenanigans about comparing it to the MacBook Air, but who cares? It is literally an apples to oranges comparison.
True.
The Surface Pro and similar devices are solid machines, and I recently have gotten rid of my Surface Pro. I just wasn't using it. It's not a bad device. I like the device. It's just the way my lifestyle is right now. I just needed to get rid of stuff, and that was one of the things that left.
Right. I certainly will say that the Surface Pro proves that this idea can work, but it needs a lot more attention than anybody's given it up to this point. And so Apple's position is like, no, they all suck. And they said this about phones before they introduced the iPhone. They all suck, and nobody likes them. They just use them because they have to. But once we figure out how to make this really sing, we'll bring one out. Don't you worry.
Yeah, every Apple transition has been like that. The 68000 series processor was used until the PowerPC chip was a good chip for them to use. And the PowerPC was used until Intel was the thing that made sense. And there was always a plan. Apple didn't say, okay, in 2 years we're shifting to Intel.
Yeah.
Apple said, we're shifting to Intel today.
I know.
And it had been ready for a long time.
Well, it had been in some form of workable for 10 years. 10 years.
Yeah.
I mean, this is one of the things that absolutely blows my mind. And in particular, that moment when they swung effortlessly like Tarzan from one vine to another in the Intel transition was really one of the great undersung strokes of genius in the entire history of the computer industry. I mean, nobody ever pulled off a transition as seamlessly as that, ever.
The only reason why iOS is not currently on Intel processors is because the A-series chip is doing so well.
Yeah.
If the A-series chip didn't work out, if the A-series chip started going the way of Motorola and IBM with the PowerPC, we would have been over to the new Intel chips in a flash.
In a flash. So, well, pardon the pun. But yeah, like that, we would. I think David Pogue once said it, and I've repeated it here on the podcast before, but we're not really Apple fans as much as we are elegance and experience fans.
We're execution fans.
Yeah. And, as long as Apple continues to execute better than most everybody else, at least in most areas, most of the time, then we're going to stick with them. That's how that goes.
Yeah, speaking of last week, we spoke about attention to detail last week with William, and you weren't here. You were off gallivanting.
That's true. I was.
So we spoke about attention to detail, and I am ridiculously concerned about that because while Apple's still got the hardware nailed, the attention to detail in their software, I am very, very concerned about. But the thing is, even though I'm concerned about it, it is still better than on the other side of the fence, and I am sure as hell not going to go to a Linux distribution.
Yeah. Well, and William talks about how even the Microsoft applications he loves have a couple of, and he uses the phrase, typically Microsoftian misfires.
Yeah.
And it's true. But I am starting to see more and more of that in the Apple software as well. And I'm hoping it's just a pressure thing because that can be solved. You can throw resources at that problem and fix it.
At this point, I don't think it's I think culture is becoming a problem in their developers. I'm not there. I don't know. I don't have any special insight on this. But there are enough little things that are happening that make me wonder exactly what is going on.
Well, it's like, we're starting to see, we're not pretending here that Apple software has ever been bug-free.
No.
Or
God, no.
that updates have ever gone smoothly or that transitions have always gone without a hitch. That's not what we're saying at all. There's always been small problems. But we're talking about the introduction of, well, for lack of a better term, boneheaded moves, like allowing your security certificates to expire. Duh.
That's exactly what I'm talking about. That is a classic situation where attention to detail, one employee could have said, hey, wait, we're about to do something ridiculously stupid and cost our users thousands upon thousands of man hours. And I guarantee you somebody said it.
Yeah. And developers, tons of support headaches.
Yeah, I guarantee you somebody along the chain said it. I also guarantee you that somebody wasn't paid attention to.
Yeah.
This is just too obvious a problem, too obvious a mistake for somebody at Apple to have not said something about this.
Well, the fact that it required a letter to developers with a really terribly well-written and sincere apology that essentially said, man, was that a screw-up. We are so sorry.
Well, there's other apologies that aren't written. Again, we spoke about this before. Discovery D.
Oh, I know.
The biggest apology was reverting it.
Yeah.
The audio core frameworks in El Capitan. We haven't talked about this on the site much, but most of the hardware companies are now saying, hey, our old stuff is now working again.
Yeah.
With relatively minor software patches, not wholesale remodification of the drivers, which is what we're concerned about. So this is once again something that somebody screwed up along the way.
Yeah.
And it just wasn't caught.
We saw this with, was it 8.1 that had the bad release?
Yeah, 8.1 and 9.2 both had kind of iffy releases.
Yeah, and then suddenly they had to, oh, nope, we're going to pull that. Here's the right one.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that kind of thing. Boneheaded moves we don't expect from Apple, and it is uncomfortable to see. We hope it'll get better. We certainly do, though, appreciate the community in situations like this because Apple's harshest critics, as I've said before, are not Windows users. They're not even Bill Gates' personal admirers. They're Apple users. Mm-hmm. Believe me. You misspell Cook's name and you will get 75 letters. Boom. Through the post. Not even hundreds of emails.
Through the post.
You'll get, dear sir, I'm writing to you and your mother to...
Okay.
But what I'm trying to say here is that the Mac community is on this. They noticed it. It's not just, oh, this just the way it is now and we're conveniently forgetting how it was in the past. No, when it comes to boneheaded moves, Apple has gotten worse. And believe me, the community's all over it, writing every Apple email address they can find, including the boss man, to let them know that this is going on. There's a benefit in having been around the Apple community for so many years, and that's that hopefully you're not wearing your rose-colored glasses. You can see when a real problem is starting to develop and let somebody know.
Yeah.
The users out there, though, there's something you can do about this, too. You don't have to write directly to Tim Cook. That's probably overkill for a small bug in QuickTime or something. But here's what you can do is nearly every Mac app in the help menu or in the application menu has a send feedback. And that is exactly where you ought to go. You need to obviously make your report as concise as you can, as accurate as you can, and try to be, civil. But, let them know if there's a bug in a program that's really affecting your work, you let them know. Because I know for a fact, having been on the other side of this fence, that they read those. That is by far the most effective way. Going out on a random wall on Facebook to complain about Apple's poor treatment of such and such, not very effective.
Yeah.
It might make you feel better, but it's really not very effective. Sending feedback will actually help. Moving on. The pencil's been broken. One of the usual sites for teardowns that you can always rely on. There's a couple of them that actually do this all the time, but the first one you usually get to it is iFixit, and despite the irony of their name. And in this case, they tore down the Apple Pencil to find out what's in it, but they also tore it down quite literally because, as they discovered, there is no way to open this thing without breaking it completely. And of course, sticking it in a sharpener is a very bad idea. But we knew that.
My 5-year-old son's entire school has 0 pencil sharpeners.
That's, this is a reflection of my age, but I find that amazing.
So their school list is mechanical pencils.
Wow. Okay.
Yep.
Mechanical pencils used to be strictly for the kids that were never going to get kissed, ever.
Now they're de rigueur.
Yeah. I'm surprised they're still using pencils at all. But then the future that I was painted as a child was that we'd all be thinking our homework by now. So,
Well, that's not happening.
I don't want to be bitter. The pencil, the Apple Pencil drawing stylus is, as it turns out, thanks to this teardown, we have discovered something valuable. So I commend iFixit for showing us that the Apple Pencil is an absolutely amazing piece of engineering. It really, a folding logic board, even more miniaturized components than one finds in an iPhone, a decent battery life in something that small and thin. Yes, there are some things we can complain about, like that stupid cap, which everyone in the world is going to lose or get lost in the wash or something. They could have done something more with that, I think. But overall, the guts of the Apple Pencil are just astonishing. But as usual, iFixit goes a little bit too far and in complaining that this thing isn't very repairable. In fact, you can't get into it at all without breaking it. So, as I say, iFixit performs a valuable service in allowing us a peek into the specifics of what it takes to put an Apple product together. But their obsession with repairability is at times, not always, but at times, inappropriate.
You know what? I would rather this have been a little bit further around and had a replaceable battery. I don't think that's an unacceptable compromise. I have zero problem with the motherboard not being component repairable. I have zero problem with the little metal nibs in there to figure out orientation not being user replaceable. I have no problem with that at all. There are sacrifices you do have to make, but I think that it's just one tiny little step too far with an utterly unreplaceable battery. I think that is the problem.
Well, I can't argue for the Pencil's viability for replaceable batteries because Apple probably did have a decent reason for it, and their reasoning probably goes along the lines of, this battery is not going to fail within the useful life of this pencil. Okay, except for defects, you're probably right. Yeah. But I will make the case for they've done exactly the same thing with some of the Macs. They've sealed in the battery and made it utterly, completely unreplaceable. And the number of repairs that have been needed to that area of those Macs has dropped like a frickin' rock.
Well, we don't know that for sure yet. The first utterly unreplaceable battery is in the new MacBook. Okay, my Retina MacBook Pro and even the current Retina MacBook Pro does have a replaceable battery. It's not user replaceable. It's not something I can swap in there at a moment's notice when I've got a dead battery and put it in there. But if I was suitably inclined, I could get a new battery and put it in because I'm technically savvy enough to do it.
Right.
Okay, it's not something where I hand them the computer and they hand me a new computer back like it is with a pencil.
Right. Well, but having said that, even as somebody who is technically savvy, you've seen the pictures of the teardown. You know perfectly well that there's a very small percentage of the population that could even attempt the repair,
sure,
even if it was repairable.
Yeah.
Now, you swapping out batteries, that's one thing. But I have noticed that the more Apple seals and makes unuser upgradable anyway, these parts, the fewer repairs they have to have. And I'm still in touch with some of my old employers, which were repair shops. I know you are too.
Mm-hmm.
So we know that if you walk into a Mac repair shop today, you are mostly going to see machines that are much older. Or when you see new machines, it's because they got dropped in a toilet or, thrown down a flight of stairs or something very obviously user abuse. But the fact of the matter is that Apple's sealing more and more things makes their computers less and less prone to failure. But having said that, if they are defective in the first place, then it makes it worse when they are defective because now they're even difficult for Apple to repair.
Yeah, and that's, again, like I said, I do have lines. I don't want to get into an iPhone and replace the Wi-Fi board in iPhone. That's not what I'm talking about.
Right.
But like I said, I would have accepted a slightly larger pencil for the quadruple A battery that is in the Microsoft stylus.
But then Jonathan Ive wouldn't get to say, it's so thin in the video.
Well, good on him. there are design sacrifices that there are things that they are doing that drive me insane. Like the new Apple TV remote. Okay. There is no obvious up and down. Where have we heard this before?
Oh, yeah.
If you grab the Apple TV remote, there is nothing that your finger will find that says this is up and this is down.
Oh, I see. You mean the sight unseen, like at night.
Right. Like if I'm just reaching down to grab it.
Right.
It's the flat spot is the flat spot. And to figure out which one is the right side, if I'm not looking at it, I'm pressing down to see if it's clicking. And that's kind of garbage. The original Apple TV remote, the little white thing, it was offset enough that you knew which way it was up. But this thing with the buttons in the center, equidistantly spaced from each end, that's ridiculous.
Yeah.
And equally, I think that this choice with the pencil is equally ridiculous. Give me slightly larger diameter, give me an extra 1/4 inch long, and give me the ability to put in a battery. You want to impress me with Apple's longevity? Do that.
Yeah.
So I don't have to get another one of these damn things in 2.5 years.
Well, I was showing a video of the pencil in the hands of a sketch artist. So it's a video on YouTube by a guy named Sketcherman. He has a beautiful video. I wish more people would do it this way, where he just draws a sketch. He doesn't talk. There's captions on the bottom to say, a few spec things, but he just basically draws and demos the product that way. Beautifully done. You don't need the dulcet tones of a British guy going over the top to let you know that that he's really enjoying using it. And I think that Apple's obsession with making it as beautiful as they possibly can, as thin and as beautiful as possibly can, it pays off more often than it doesn't. And so in this case, I think that they certainly would have considered, let's put 2 AAA batteries in the body. That'll be a user replaceable part.
To be clear, that'd be quadruple A, by the way.
You're right. Sorry. But as we were demonstrating this, first hand that shot up said, can the cap on the other end erase things? And of course it should. Of course it should. If you're going to make this thing look like a pencil, then you need to make the top work like an eraser.
What do you bet that somebody figures that out just based on the proximity of the tip to the tablet itself?
Well, right now, each individual program has its own way of erasing.
Yep.
Like Paper by 53 has one way and Procreate has another way and so on. That is Windows thinking. It'll shake itself out. I think that will shake itself out. I think looking at the technology of the pencil, I think there is a way to figure out that this is not the tip of the pencil touching the tablet. That's what the little metal bars in the tip of the pencel for. Are they not? Right.
Orientation and location.
It's the most beautiful eraser we've ever made.
Something like that. If they're 5 inches off the screen and there's a touch being detected, then it's erasing.
Yeah.
But no, that doesn't currently exist, by the way. And you know what? If you're a developer and you're listening, do this and you can have it for free. How about that?
Yeah, there you go. We're giving away $1 million ideas right here on the MacNN podcast. But that palm rejection they spent all that time working on, if it detects that giant palm is making a vigorous shaking motion, that's your eraser, your own palm. There, another $1 million.
Oh, there you go. That works too.
Yeah. Like, I hate this. I'm a terrible artist. You're just massively erasing. All right, moving on. We want to talk a bit about one of our friends, and we call them our friends very proudly. There's a site that has been around for a long time, almost as long as us, at least the last 17 years, called MacUpdate.com. They are a wonderful repository of, a great public service for the entire Mac community, because up until just recently, they have been one of the safest places to get updates and to try out apps. Every day they have this long list of apps that have been updated. You can go and look at the list, check and see if there's an app of yours on it, and then download the update right from there.
Yeah, but you know what? They're not so much our friends that we won't ask them some hard questions about some things.
Well, yes, absolutely. And this is what I was about to say, is that even friends have arguments. Even friends have moments where they're like, what are you doing? I am not going to be your wingman on this. Are you kidding? I don't want to say that we're distancing ourselves either from them, because we do enjoy a very good relationship with them. We've helped them out with their bundle deals a number of times, and they've made offers available to our MacNN readers, for which we are happy. And again, the site's always been kind of a bastion of useful, free downloading. So it's been a valuable public service, even as other places. I mean, like Version Tracker. Anybody remember Version Tracker? It went back a ways. Used to be a Mac-only place, and then they added Windows software, and then they got sold to CNET. Then they became Download.com, and now they are probably one of the chief malware distributors on the net. We certainly don't want to see Mac Update, or any other website for that matter, go that path. But over the years, I have narrowed down my list of places I consider to be safe to download from to 3 sources: the Mac App Store, the developer's own site, and Mac Update. Now, recently, Mac Update started making some changes that may make some of you take the site off that third position on the list. And I wanted to talk a little about what's going on first. If you haven't tried the site, you should. They still perform this function. They do, however, rely on their users more and more to subscribe, to become paid members. You can join it for free, actually, and get five downloads from their desktop app software, or you can become a paid subscriber, as I am, and you get a Mac Update desktop program that allows you to just update your software automatically all the time, nothing. You don't even have to look at the site anymore. But if you go to the site in search of, say, new apps or what have you, then you won't see any of the usual ads on the site because your paid membership eliminates those as well. It's a great way to support Mac Update, but also you get tons of benefits as a result. I think this is a fair deal, so I sign up. Lately, they have decided to start looking around at what the rest of the industry is doing, people like Softonic, people like CNET, and they have come to realize that one of the key advantages of the Mac Update desktop software and of their service generally is in the installation of software. Like the Mac App Store makes the installation of Mac software incredibly easy, and it's modeled on the iOS App Store. There's no leftover files when you install something. You just download it, it installs, and it cleans up after itself. And that's the way it should be. The Mac experience was less so until the Mac App Store came along. And Mac Update's desktop software emulates that function very well with thousands, in fact, of third-party Mac programs. So it's really been a convenience that, again, I think is worth supporting.
Yeah, and to be clear, not every form of software can be distributed on the Mac App Store. If you are doing things that the OS will allow you to do, but violates Apple's guidelines for the Mac App Store, like some driver installations and things of that nature.
The Cocktail, Onyx,
right?
Any of these kind of system optimizer thingies, most of which are junk.
You're not going to be on the Mac App Store. You have to have an alternate route. Audio Hijack.
Yeah, Audio Hijack, the thing we use to record this podcast, because it works closely at the system component level with the audio and intercepts the audio, that's never going to be on the Mac App.
There are audio recorders, but Audio Hijack is not.
Yeah, it's just because of the particular way it does what it does.
Right.
So there are plenty of legitimate apps that for one reason or another can't be on the Mac App Store, or just, the developer doesn't want them to be. And so a place like Mac Update is an important service. We used to have another one called Bodega that was very nice, but they went the way of all things. So Mac Update is kind of the last bastion of third-party, independent Mac software distributors. Now, just like MacNN, they rely on ads, and in their case, they also rely on paid members to help meet the bills. It is very expensive, quite frankly, to run a site like that, and they have even more close relationships with developers than we do, because they have to work with them every single day. Did you update your app yet? How about now? What about now? You got it now? Okay, we'll take it. And so on. So there's a lot going on there. And they have decided that one of the things that they've looked at that other sites do that they want to also do is to, I'm just going to come out and say it, monetize the installation experience, because that's what people do. They come to the site, they look up their update, they download the update and install it.
And bail.
Yeah, and that's it. They're gone.
Often with ad blockers too.
Yeah, with ad blockers on. So the site gets absolutely nothing out of this. They give things and they get nothing. So they sort of have to monetize. Believe me, we can sort of sympathize with all this. One of the things they've decided to do is that the users that are not members, either free members or paid members, the users who are not members, I'm going to call them the drive-by users, will, instead of getting just a straight download of, say, Firefox or something like that, and they are testing this on just 1% of all of their available downloads. They have like 40,000 or so. But 1% of their available downloads have a special Mac Update installer, a custom package that installs the program that you asked for, but also offers you the opportunity to install other things that they've been paid to carry, such as browser search bars, Mac optimizers, most of which are junk, I keep saying, but they are, and stuff like that. Now, in this particular case of Mac Update versus, say, Softonic or CNET, there's a screen that comes up that says, would you like to also install this other thing, and a brief explanation of what it is and who it's from. And you have two buttons, accept or skip. And if you press skip, then your original download, the Firefox or whatever it is, downloads as normal, but you just don't get this other optional install that you could maybe have gotten or might be interested in.
Importantly, neither of these are the default. You can't just, okay,
right,
click through in the default and all of a sudden you're slammed with this extra install.
Right.
You actually have to mouse over one of the options to accept or deny.
Yeah.
The language is clear. The language does say, we're going to install this extra. Do you want us to do this? I'm of a mixed mind about this. I am okay with what they're doing. They are upfront about it. They are telling you they're going to install it, and they are giving you the option to opt out of it.
Yeah.
A little more transparency from the get-go would have been better.
If they'd said, by the way, starting next month, we're going to have this happen. Here's what it's going to look like. And this is how you avoid it if you don't want it. And here's how you accept it if you do. That would have been good.
Yes.
So I went and talked to the founder of Mac Update, a guy named Jay Mueller, and he laid out his case. He's got to monetize his site. So he needs a way of getting the user's eyeballs. And this is a popular way to do it, at least popular from the point of view of providers of download aggregate sites. It's a way for them to pay the bills. He wanted to communicate to us that he doesn't feel like he's going in the same direction as CNET and Softonic. He is experimenting with some of the techniques they use to try and figure out how to make that a really much better idea than the way they do it. Or at least that's the impression that I got in talking to him, that he's still an active member of the Mac community, that he relies on people like our readers to come to his site and get their updates from him that they can't get from the Mac App Store. So, he's very dependent on us. So he has no reason to give us a terrible experience, but he'd like to use that technique to deliver a better experience. And in particular, two things. One is finding more related apps that users would be interested in at the same time as they're downloading, say, Skype. For example, if you downloaded an update to Skype and you got an offer to install a trial of Skype Call Recorder, that makes sense. That's a good idea, actually. So that kind of thing. And then the other part of it is that it also helps with app discovery. One of the biggest problems with the Mac App Store and all the other aggregates is all they can do is tell you what came out today. They can't really tell you what's great. Yes, we do reviews on MacNN, and that helps, but we can't cover the thousands of apps that come out every day. And again, some of them are strongly to be avoided of the thousands of apps that come out every day. We try to steer you to the really good stuff, though.
Yeah, we are looking, incidentally, at the plagiarism issue in the App Store. We'll get back to you on that one, though.
What we're talking about briefly is apps that are almost exact copies of other apps. And because they're not malware or anything, the App Store people tend to approve them because they haven't done the comparison and said, wait a minute, this is an obvious ripoff of this. And only when it becomes a big publicity thing, like in the case of Flappy Bird, then something will get done. The squeaky wheel gets the grease. But
yeah, anyway, back to the original.
Back to the original point. I don't want to sound like I'm rationalizing Mac Update. I want you guys to try it out, send your feedback, and let them know. Because if they discover from their readers this is a terrible idea, please don't do it, they won't. Because they're very dependent on you for their income. But at the same time, I agree with them that there's possible ways to use the installer process to enhance the experience or to let you know about other apps that you could be interested in, or this download was brought to you by Bank of America, or whatever.
And the letter C.
Something that will keep... There is a certain point at which I want the lights to stay on at Mac Update enough that I'm willing to accept an ad in the installer. Do you understand?
Yeah, we as a community, and I'm not just saying that because this is where I work, but we as a community need to sit and have a conversation about acceptable monetization.
Yeah.
You know what? You guys didn't like OnSwipe, so I turned it off. One of the first things I did as managing editor is I had it killed.
Yes, and I, for one, am terribly grateful to you for this.
When you guys report to me that, hey, I don't like this ad, I do what I can, okay?
Yeah.
But at some point, you listeners, some of you have ad blockers, some of you don't. I'm not saying you're stealing. That I would never say that. Your internet is your experience, and you have to control as best you can. But places like MacNN, we aren't volunteers. This is what we do for a living. So at some point, we as a community have to sit down and figure out what is acceptable and what is not as far as monetization goes. And this will not be a one-way discussion. This will not be me saying, this is what you'll accept and this is how you will like it. That's not how this is going to be. We have to talk about it.
And it costs a lot of money to run a site like this. You'd be surprised.
And the forums, there was a lengthy discussion about this. And there are people there who say that, well, the internet destroys my computer. And you know what? It does. But some of the answer to that is not clicking on these 15 picture slideshows that require you to click through 30 times.
Yeah.
So I mean, this has got to be a two-way street. The advertising experience on MacNN is light compared to 90% of the internet. And I continue to promise you that I will do what I can to keep that down.
Yeah.
So, but let's talk someday, okay?
It's true. We would love to hear your feedback about this, but I have to admit that we appreciate realist feedback more than unrealistic feedback. Why can't you just get rid of all the ads and let the free market take care of you? No.
Well, how would it do that exactly?
No. So, we certainly want to hear your feedback, but we want the experience of reading MacNN to be a pleasant one for you. We're doing several changes internally that are helping with that. One of the things that is most visible, as Mike mentioned, is when we tried OnSwipe, we thought, oh, well, this is a nice presentation for mobile and we need that, so let's try that. Our readers got back to us and said, you know what, it's kind of obnoxious. And so we went, okay, that's the end of that.
But again, this is the same situation. You don't like what Mac Company is doing, tell them politely that you don't like what they're doing, and tell them why.
And also understand where they're coming from. I have been assured they're going to be a little more upfront about explaining their rationale. Once you have that and you have the facts about what it takes to run a place like that, then you'll understand and be able to make a much more informed opinion. You may still not like it and you may still say so, but at least you'll know what the deal is. They didn't just do it for spite.
Yep. My promise to you as the content driver over here is I will respect you as readers as best as I can.
Yeah.
But if you come in and poop on my house and email me in all caps and exclamation points and demand that I change for you, that email is going exactly where you think it should. If you got that email, it's going exactly where you would put it.
Yeah. That's a very good way of putting it. I like that. Next up, 5 reasons to switch. 5 reasons to switch to Windows, 5 reasons to switch to Mac. We can't make up our minds around here. And the worst part is we got the same guy to do both articles.
If there was a guy on our staff that bled 6 colors, he's the guy.
He's the guy.
Like I said, publicly, I have all kinds of platforms in this house, and I have Windows machines. I have OS 10 machines. I use them both. I prefer working on OS 10. I like Apple hardware, and it's fine. There are reasons for each platform. If you come and tell me this platform does everything perfectly, I know you're lying to me.
Yeah.
OpenGL performance on the same GPU from OS 10 to Windows is 10% faster on Windows.
Yep.
And it's been wider. That gap has been wider.
Yeah.
Up until just a very few software revisions ago, it was closer to 25%. Back once upon a time, I used to do work for IMG Magazine. And invariably, I would get the PC version of a game that I was just supplied. And the frame rate on the same Intel hardware would be higher in Windows.
Mm-hmm.
So, and William just touched on the gaming aspect because he's not much of a gamer. But the point of the 2 articles is not to say that you're an idiot for supporting your platform. The point of the 2 articles is to say, hey, look, there are things that other people do better. There are things that other companies do better than Apple. There are things that Apple does better than other companies.
Yeah.
And I understand where William's first article can be construed as him justifying why he's on OS 10. And yes, I understand it sort of reads that way. But if you look a little bit deeper into it, there's a bigger truth. That is a dyed-in-the-wool OS 10 user saying, yeah, this is better on Windows, but it's good enough on OS 10.
And I found it most illuminating, actually, for both series. It reminded me of the reasons that I liked the Mac in the first place. Because it's been a long time. And, every so often, you really need to reassess. To give you a quick analogy, I've always used just a silicone cheapy cover for my phones, right? Because I don't tend to drop them. I tend to remember that they're $600 to $800 devices, so I don't even put them in situations where they're likely to get dropped. And as a result, or just plain stupid luck, I have almost never dropped the phone, and I've never had one damaged. I still have my original iPhone from 2007, and it still works. It's still fine. So I've been very lucky in that regard, but also very careful in that regard. However, when I get the new iPhone 6S, I had to reassess my beliefs. I had to really look at this thing because I was playing with it in my hand, and it was just way slipperier than the 5S or any of the phones that I've owned previously. And so every so often, you need to challenge your long-held beliefs. I think this also applies equally to Macs and PCs as well. You need to stop thinking in absolutist terms, Apple rules and PC drools, and say these things Apple does well, and that's important to me. These things PC does well, and that's important to other people. But there's nothing necessarily wrong with that. There's obviously still areas where we can make fun of both platforms, and I'd like to think that Apple users are particularly good at making fun of their own platform.
Oh, yeah. If I see one more Johnny Ive video in a stark white background, my head may explode.
It's the most beautiful parody we've ever made.
Oh, God. It's awful.
One last thing, and I will
I'm so tired. I'm so tired of those.
One last thing, and I will let you go really quick. Quicken 2016 is out.
Yes, and William has it in hand.
Yes, I'm anxious to see what he has to say about it, but this is a very much a Charlie Brown, Lucy, and the football situation.
Oh, you're not kidding.
And always has been. Now, this year, again, like always, Intuit swears up and down that this is the most Windows-like, in terms of feature compatibility, version of Quicken they've ever produced. And that is not per se a lie, but it is an omission.
Yeah, but they're not saying parity. Yeah, they're not saying that it's equivalent. They're just saying that it's closer.
Yeah, closer than ever.
But
yeah,
William is on the case. William is looking at it right now.
Yeah, the funny thing is, though, is that I find this is one of the few programs I can't relate to this because I've never had so much excess money lying around that I felt like I needed
that you needed to count it.
A pro-level accounting and management software like Quicken. But almost everyone, you ask any PC user about what's some of the best software made for that platform, and they will always point to Quicken. It's going to be fascinating to me to see what William comes up with. I know that luckily there's wealthier Mac users than me who need this software and would really, really love it if Intuit would join the rest of the world and make a version for Mac that is first class or at least equal to the PC side. Why they don't, even when Bill Campbell was on the board of Apple for years and years, is one of the true enduring mysteries. And that's really all I've got to say about it. Come on, Quicken. Stop playing Lucy in the football with us, all right? And as we often do on the MacNN podcast, we'd like to wrap it up with App of the Week. Now, this is usually handled by William Gallagher, and surprise, this week, it's handled by William Gallagher again. Why were you so surprised? Anyway, William, what is your App of the Week?
Previously on App of the Week. Back in February, I was shown Ticket to Ride. It's the iOS version of the board game. You do things with trains and railroads in the Old West. And I'm not a gamer myself, so I asked my wife, Angela, what do you think of it? And for 2 weeks, all I got was this. Then, after intensive relate marriage counselling, all I got was this. Angela had found how to turn the music off. And that's where we were through March, April, July, until this week, in fact, when finally I knew what I could say that would get Angela acknowledging my existence. When I could get her to look up from her iPad for even 1 second of humanity. Angela, I said, would you like the brand new, out this week, Ticket to Ride 2.0?
Who are you again?
Well, I can tell you, I think I've gathered this from what she says, Ticket to Ride 2.0 adds portrait-style game layouts instead of solely landscape, but only if the particular game map supports it. So you get America, the Old West style to start with, but you can get an add-on, and one of the add-ons is India, a map of India, which happens to support this landscape thing. So it's only India so far, more are coming, but it does look good. There's also a lot of behind-the-scenes stuff going on with the new version, including the fact that it's now a universal app. There are multiple games that can go on at the same time, online things. You have the ability now to start a game on your iPad at work and continue the same one on your iPhone at the dinner table. Yeah, so brilliant. Not my app of the week, but apparently it's Angela's.
Well, that about wraps it up for episode 42 of the MacNN podcast, which I will dedicate to my friend and long-gone colleague, Douglas Adams. Those of you who know why, you know why. Anyway, on behalf of the entire staff of MacNN, I'm the editor, Charles Martin, with managing editor Mike right over there.
Hi.
Yeah, goodbye, not hi.
Or bye. And I'd also like to say that everyone who listens to this podcast probably gets the 42 reference.
We'd just like to say once again that we appreciate your listening to us. Tell your friends, and we'll see you next week for episode 43.
Anyway, goodbye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Goodbye.